I stood at the podium in the community center gymnasium, straightening a tie I'd bought that morning because my old one had a coffee stain I couldn't scrub out, when my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. 10 minutes before my son's college graduation. I smiled before I looked at the screen, figuring Marcus wanted me to save him a seat closer to the stage. Instead, I read, "Dad, please don't come up to me after the ceremony. Danielle's parents are going to be here, and I don't want them to see us hug in front of everyone." I read it 3 times. The gymnasium around me kept buzzing with families finding their folding chairs, someone testing the microphone, a toddler laughing somewhere behind the bleachers. My hands didn't shake. They just went numb, the way a limb does right before it falls asleep. I reached up and touched the class ring hanging from the chain around my neck, my wife's ring from the university. She never got to see her son attend, because ovarian cancer took her when Marcus was 7. I stared at that phone until the screen went dark on its own. "My girl," I whispered. Except I wasn't talking to Marcus. I was talking to Renee. When my wife died, Marcus was 7 years old, and I was 41 years old with a mortgage, a job driving long-haul freight 3 weeks out of every month, and absolutely no idea how to braid the hair of a little girl, except I didn't have a little girl. I had a little boy who cried every night for 2 months asking why mommy's side of the bed was always cold now. I quit the long-haul routes. Took a pay cut and a job driving a regional route for a grocery distributor out of Toledo so I could be home every night. Some men would call that a sacrifice. I never thought of it that way. It was just Tuesday. It was just what you do. I learned to make grilled cheese 17 different ways because it was the only thing Marcus would eat without arguing for a year after his mother passed. I learned to do the thing with a wet washcloth on his forehead that Renee used to do when he had fevers, because kids don't care if you're doing it right, they care that you're doing it at all. I coached his Little League team for 6 years, even though I didn't know a curveball from a changeup when I started, because the alternative was some other kid's dad standing where I should have been standing. There's a photograph I still keep in my wallet, worn soft at the corners, Marcus at 9 years old, missing both front teeth, holding up a participation ribbon like it was an Olympic medal, and me behind him in my delivery uniform. Name patch still pinned crooked because I'd rushed straight from my route to make the game. I missed the first 2 innings. He hit a triple in the third. "Dad, did you see it?" "I saw the whole thing," I told him, which was mostly true, and mostly is close enough when your kid is 9 and glowing. I never remarried. There were a couple of women along the way, Diane from the church potluck committee, a woman named Carol I met at a trade show 2 counties over, but nothing ever stuck. And if I'm honest, I never let anything stick. Marcus came first. Every version of my life after Renee died had him standing at the center of it, and I built my whole identity around getting him to a place where he'd never once have to wonder if his father showed up. When he got into Ohio State on a partial academic scholarship, I cried in the truck in the school parking lot before I ever told him congratulations, because I knew what that acceptance letter cost his mother. In a way, every late night she used to read to him before bed, every flashcard she made him practice with, even when the chemo made her hands shake. He earned that seat. We both did in our own way. Everything shifted when he met Danielle. I liked her, genuinely. The first few times I met her, she was sharp, funny, asked good questions about my roots and the different terrain across 3 states, remembered small things I'd mentioned weeks earlier. Then I met her parents. Gregory and Pamela Ashford lived in a colonial house out past Dublin, Ohio, with a circular driveway and a housekeeper who answered the door the first time I visited, which told me plenty before anyone said a word. Pamela greeted me with a handshake that felt measured, like she was grading it. "Ray," she said, tilting her head slightly, "Marcus talks about you constantly. I hope he only tells you the good parts," I said, trying for warmth. "Oh, families always leave out the interesting bits," she said, and everyone around her laughed the way people laugh at a joke they've been told is funny by someone with more money than them. Later that afternoon, we walked out to the driveway together, my Silverado parked beside Gregory's Audi, and Pamela looked at my truck for a beat longer than she needed to. "Well," she said, "that's certainly a workhorse. It gets me where I need to go," I said, and she smiled without her eyes moving. "I'm sure it does." Before I could say anything else, Marcus touched my elbow. "Hey, Dad, next time, maybe just park down the block a little?" He said it lightly, like he was asking me to grab milk on the way home. They're kind of particular about how things look. I told him I'd remember that. I did remember it. It saddened me the way a splinter sits under skin you can't quite reach. You forget about it until you press your thumb in the wrong spot. Over the months that followed, Small things kept stacking on top of each other the way snow does before you notice the roof is bowing. Marcus mentioned I should maybe get a new dress shirt for the engagement dinner. The one I'd worn to his college orientation was starting to look dated. He suggested a barber instead of the guy who'd cut my hair for 11 years, said it'd photograph better. He wasn't wrong about the photographs. I went along with all of it. Because that's what you do when you love somebody, you bend a little so the day goes smoother. I never imagined the bending wouldn't stop at close. I unlocked my phone in the gymnasium hallway, opened his message again, and typed one word back. Okay. I hit send, slid the phone into my jacket pocket, and rested my palm flat against my chest where the ring hung under my shirt, and I walked toward a folding chair in the very back row instead of the reserved seating up front where a paper sign read, Family of Graduate in gold cursive lettering. Nobody stopped me. Nobody noticed. The processional music started. Somewhere near the front, I could see Gregory and Pamela Ashford in expensive spring colors, laughing with people who all seemed to know each other already. I found a seat in the last row, next to an older woman knitting something out of pale blue yarn, and I watched my son's graduation from 40 rows back like a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong building. When they called his name Marcus Anthony Holloway, I stood up out of habit before I caught myself and sat back down, because standing up alone in the back row would only draw the kind of attention I was apparently supposed to avoid. He crossed the stage. He shook the dean's hand. Somewhere in the crowd of 2,000 people, his father clapped along with everyone else, and nobody knew which hands belonged to him. My knee, which had never fully recovered after I tore something loading a truck 4 years back, started aching from the folding chair, and I told myself, easy now, the way I always did when my body complained. I sat through the rest of the names, hundreds of them, because I'd told myself I'd stay for the whole thing, even from the back, even unseen. When it ended, everyone stood and moved in slow, happy clusters toward the exits, hugging, taking photographs, tossing caps that had already come down. I stood at the very edge of it all, close enough to see Marcus laughing with Danielle's family, far enough that nobody would ever have to explain who the man in the ill-fitting new tie was. I drove straight to Hoover Reservoir instead of going home. Renee and I used to bring a thermos of coffee and sit on the tailgate out there most Sunday mornings before Marcus was born, back when we were young and broke and thought we had unlimited time. I hadn't been out there in years. The bench near the water was still standing, more weathered, paint peeling at the edges, same as me. I reached into my jacket and pulled out 3 folded pages, the speech I'd written for his graduation party that evening, the one where family friends were supposed to gather at the VFW hall, and I was supposed to say a few words about the boy who became a man while I wasn't looking. I unfolded it and read it out loud to nobody but the ducks paddling near the shoreline. My boy, when your mother passed, I honestly didn't know if I had it in me to finish raising you right, but every morning you'd come find me in the kitchen and say, "Morning, Dad," like it was nothing, like it was owed to you, and somehow that got me through more mornings than I can count. I had to stop there. My glasses fogged. I took them off, wiped them on my shirt, and folded the pages back into thirds before I reached the part where I talked about hoping he'd married someone kind, someone who valued him the way his mother had valued me. My phone buzzed against the bench. Marcus calling. I let it ring out. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Then texts started coming, one after another. "Dad, where'd you go? Dad, everyone's asking where you are. Dad, please just answer." I turned the phone face down on the bench beside me and watched a boy nearby cast a fishing line into the reservoir, his grandfather steadying his elbow. Neither one of them was performing for anybody. They were just there, together, plainly. Back at the VFW hall, I found out later things had started unraveling in small, quiet ways before they unraveled loud. Danielle noticed first. She kept scanning the room, kept asking Marcus if he'd heard from me. Pamela, holding a glass of Prosecco, said something like, "I'm sure he'll turn up," in the tone people use when an inconvenience is mildly ruining their afternoon. Marcus's phone rang again and again, unanswered. And then, the way these things sometimes go, his cousin Theo, 22 years old, always had his phone out, had taken a photo earlier that day of Marcus's screen while he wasn't looking, a screenshot Marcus had sent his roommate that morning, half joking, half nervous. "Got a wedding-adjacent thing where my dad's basically not allowed near the good pictures, LOL. Don't say anything." Theo thought it was funny. He posted it not privately, not to the roommate, but to a shared family group chat with 40-some relatives in it, aunts and uncles and second cousins twice removed, thinking everyone would laugh along the way he had. Instead, phones across that hall began lighting up all at once. People looked down, then looked up toward Marcus with faces that had gone very still. My sister Diane, who'd flown in from Pittsburgh for this, put her hand over her mouth. An uncle quietly set down his plate. Someone near the back, an older cousin of Renee's who barely knew the family anymore, said out loud, without meaning to be heard, "After everything that man gave up for that boy." It wasn't a scene. Nobody yelled. That was almost worse, from what people told me after. The room just went quiet in that specific, heavy way a room goes quiet when everyone understands something at the same time, and nobody wants to be the one to say it first. Danielle found the screenshot on her own phone a moment later. Someone had sent it to her too, and she read it standing near the little table with the sheet cake that said, "Congratulations, Marcus," in blue icing. She looked up and found her husband-to-be across the room, laughing with his mother, completely unaware yet that the floor had shifted under him. I got home a little after 4 that afternoon. The house looked exactly the way I'd left it that morning. A rambler on the east side of Toledo, gutters I kept meaning to clear, a tire swing still hanging from the maple tree, even though Marcus hadn't touched it in 15 years. My knee had stiffened during the drive, and climbing down out of the truck sent a bolt of pain up through my hip. "Happy graduation to me," I muttered, gripping the doorframe. Dry humor is what men my age reach for when the other option is crying in a driveway. Inside, I hung my jacket carefully over a kitchen chair, out of habit, the way you take care of things even when your chest feels hollowed out. I found the box of photographs on the closet shelf, the one with the bent corner, and carried it to the couch. Marcus asleep on my chest the night after his 4th birthday party. Marcus's first day of kindergarten, one hand on his backpack strap, the other wrapped around mine. The triple in the 3rd inning, missing teeth, ribbon clutched like gold. I held that last one in both hands for a long time before I finally cried, not loud, just steady, the way a leak drips instead of bursts. I understood something sitting there I probably should have understood years earlier. I had spent 17 years teaching my son that no matter how far he pushed, no matter what he asked of me, I would absorb it without complaint. Dad would always show up. Dad would always understand. Dad would always make it easy. That wasn't devotion. That was a habit I'd built in him without meaning to, and now it had a price tag attached, and the price was me sitting alone in the back row of my own son's graduation, like a man who'd wandered in off the street. Marcus called 17 times that evening. I know because I counted, staring at the screen every time it lit up and went dark again. Around 9:30, headlights swept across my living room curtains. A car door. Footsteps on the porch, uneven, like someone who'd been standing outside deciding whether to knock. Then a knock. "Dad." His voice cracked on the single syllable. I stood in the hallway with my hand flat against the wall, every instinct in my body pulling me toward that door the way water pulls toward a drain. I looked through the gap in the curtain. He was still in his cap and gown, tassel crooked, eyes swollen. He didn't look like a college graduate anymore. He looked like the boy who used to climb into my lap after a nightmare. "Dad, please," he said again. Softer. My hand found the deadbolt. Every part of me wanted to open it, wanted to pull him inside and tell him it didn't matter, that tomorrow would look different. But then I thought about the message still sitting in my phone, and about 40 rows of empty distance between where I sat and where a paper sign had said, "Family of Graduate." And I said, quietly, through the door, "Not tonight, son. I'm sorry, but not tonight." I heard him exhale, a long broken sound, and then his footsteps went slowly back down the porch steps. I switched off the porch light. Through the gap in the curtain, I watched him sit down on the top step anyway, alone, for almost 20 minutes, before his headlights finally pulled away. Saturday morning I woke before the sun, same as I had my whole working life, retirement or not. I looked through the front window out of habit, and there he was, Marcus. Asleep in his car in my driveway, gown still on, wrinkled against the seat, windows fogged from the night's chill. He looked 22. He also looked, for one strange second, exactly 7 years old again, the age he was when his mother died, and the whole world rearranged itself around him without his permission. I put on the coffee 2 mugs, not one, because I wasn't ready to forgive him yet, but I wasn't going to pretend he wasn't my son either. I carried both cups outside and knocked on his window. He startled awake, disoriented, then saw me and his whole face folded in on itself. "I'm sorry," he said, before I'd even handed him the coffee. "I know," I said. We sat on the tailgate of my truck instead of going inside, both of us needing the open air. "I didn't sleep at all," he said. "I kept thinking maybe you'd come out. I almost did, I told him. I had my hand right on the lock. He looked up, surprised. You did? I did? Silence sat between us, not comfortable, but honest. The kind of quiet that isn't trying to fill itself with anything. Finally, he said, I never wanted to hurt you, Dad. I believe that, I said. But not wanting to hurt somebody isn't the same as choosing not to. He lowered his eyes. I was trying to keep the peace, he said. Between who? I asked. He didn't answer, so I answered for him. Between your father and people who'd already decided he wasn't good enough for their pictures. He flinched like I'd struck him. It wasn't like that, he said. No, I said. It was exactly like that. You just didn't want to say the words out loud, so you let a comment about parking spots do it for you first, and then you kept letting little comments do it for a year, and yesterday, you finally let a text message finish the job. He put his face in his hands. I want to show you something, I said, and went inside for the folded speech, still creased from my jacket pocket, ink slightly smudged from where my thumb had pressed against it at the reservoir. I handed it to him. Read the first part, I said. His voice shook, reading it back to me, my own words, about mornings and mothers and reasons to get out of bed, and he stopped himself halfway through, unable to continue. I didn't know, he said. No, I said. You didn't. About an hour later, an SUV pulled into my driveway, and Gregory Ashford climbed out wearing jeans instead of the pressed slacks I'd only ever seen him in. He looked like a man who hadn't slept either. I'm here because some things need saying, he told me on the porch, and I let him up. He turned to Marcus first. Your mother was wrong to push what she pushed, he said. Marcus nodded, tears already falling again. And Theo shouldn't have posted what he posted, Gregory continued. But neither one of them held your phone yesterday morning. You did. Marcus's shoulders dropped. You had every chance to tell my wife no, Gregory said, steady, not unkind. You had every chance to tell your own father the truth instead of asking him to disappear quietly so nobody's feelings got bruised but his. I spent 30 years married to a woman who cares more about how things look than how people feel, Gregory said, looking at me now. And I let her train my own son into thinking that's just how families operate. It isn't. Peace bought at somebody else's expense isn't peace. It's just cowardice wearing a nice suit. Nobody spoke for a long moment. The truth didn't need volume. It just sat there on the porch with the three of us in the early light. 4 months passed before I told this part of the story to anyone. Autumn came to Toledo the way it always does, the maples along my street turning the color of the ribbon Marcus once held up like gold. Marcus and Danielle didn't marry that fall as planned. The reception hall deposit got refunded. They needed time apart from the version of themselves that had let a roomful of relatives decide what mattered. Slowly, in smaller ways, they found their way back to each other, a courthouse ceremony eventually, 12 people total, no seating chart with my name conspicuously absent from the front rows. A card came in the mail the week before. Dad, I understand if you're not ready. I haven't earned my way back yet. I just want you to know this marriage starts differently than the one we almost had. I read it twice, picked up a pen, and wrote back 4 words. Build it on courage. I didn't attend that ceremony either, not out of spite, but because forgiveness and trust are 2 different debts, and only one of them gets paid in a single afternoon. A few weeks after that, on a Sunday evening, my phone rang. Hey, Dad. Hey, yourself. Did you eat? I did. What'd you make? I laughed. You're only asking because you think I burned something. He laughed too. And for 8 unremarkable minutes, we talked about the Browns' quarterback situation and whether my tomatoes had survived the first frost. And when we hung up, I realized he hadn't called needing anything from me at all. He'd called just to see how I was. Sundays became our day after that. Not every week, but often sometimes coffee on the porch, sometimes a ball game on in the background while we barely spoke, once 4 solid hours repainting the fence out back that I'd been putting off since Renee was alive to nag me about it. Around lunchtime, he wiped his forehead and said, I forgot how much work this is. I told him I'd warned him. He said he thought I was exaggerating. I've raised you, I said. I know exactly how stubborn you get. He grinned. Learned it from somewhere. Later that afternoon, he looked at my old truck parked in the driveway and asked if he could borrow it. His car was in the shop. When he came back with lumber loaded in the bed, he sat behind the wheel a moment before climbing out, running his hand along the hood. I used to think this thing was embarrassing, he said. I remember, I told him. It isn't, he said. It's just he searched for the word old. That's the nicest thing anybody's called it in years, I said, and he laughed, and then his face went serious. It got me everywhere I ever needed to go growing up, he said. I never thanked you for that. You don't have to, I told him. I want to, he said, and handed me back the keys. I started volunteering that winter with a program at the community college, teaching basic vehicle maintenance to kids who'd never so much as checked their own oil. For years, nearly every part of who I was had started with the words Marcus's father. And there was nothing wrong with that, except I'd forgotten there was a man underneath the title. One evening, a 19-year-old named Tyrell looked at an engine I just finished explaining and said, "I'll never be as good at this as you." "You don't have to be," I told him. "You just have to be a little better than you were last week." Saying it out loud helped me as much as it seemed to help him. One Sunday that following spring, Marcus came by carrying 2 coffees and a folded stack of paper I recognized immediately. "I found it," he said, "tucked inside Mom's old Bible on your shelf. I never finished reading it. You can now," I told him. He unfolded the last page and read it quietly to himself. Then out loud, his voice breaking somewhere near the end wherever life takes you. "Never forget whose son you are. You weren't raised on money or how things look to strangers. You were raised by a man who fixed what was broken because quitting was never on the table. And if anyone ever makes you feel small for where you came from, remember that your home was built on love long before anybody ever cared how it photographed." He set the pages down in his lap. "I'm sorry it took me this long," he said. "I know," I said. He reached over, not for a hug, just to rest his hand over mine on the tailgate, and this time I let him. We sat there while the sun went down over the maple tree, neither one of us needing to say anything else. Some things don't heal because somebody finally says the right words. They heal because people start showing up differently, one ordinary Sunday at a time. I still wear my wife's ring on the chain around my neck. I still drive the same old Silverado. My knee still aches before it rains. Some things about a man never change. But here's what I know now that I didn't know standing in that gymnasium hallway. Children don't owe their parents a perfect life, but they do owe them the truth, spoken plainly, instead of a text message sent quietly so nobody has to feel the weight of saying it out loud. And loving somebody, really loving them, sometimes means refusing to make it easy on them the one time it actually matters.